national and international research publications and presentations to her credit. She is associated with the editorial board of many reputed journals. An eminent speaker and a renowned scholar, Dr. Janata was recipient of the Best Researcher Award instituted by the University of Malaya in the year 2019. On behalf of the Department of English of St. Xavier's College, I extend a most cordial welcome to you, ma'am. We are also very happy to say that participants from different parts of the country are joining us on the screen. I cordially welcome each one of you to this session on South African literature, the players of political, social, and cultural dimensions in fiction. So once again, I welcome all of you to this fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Milan ma'am.
Now over to Dr. Janata or Saumi, if you have anything to say, please.
No, ma'am. Thank you, Milan ma'am. And over to Dr. Janata Kumari.
Okay, shall we start?
Yes, yes.
Am I audible, Saumi?
Yes, you are clear.
Okay. So it's a very good morning to all the participants. I record my sense of gratitude to the St. Xavier's College for Women, Aluva, the management, the principal, the head of the department, Dr. Lima Anthony, and the entire team of English department. And a special note of thanks to Dr. Saumi for inviting me to be a part of this Spectra 2020 webinar series. So when the whole world is reeling under the pandemic, it's a welcome note from the Department of St. Xavier's to conduct such a webinar series with an attractive name Spectra 2020, and I'm so happy to be a part of that. My topic is the South African literature, the flares of political, social, and cultural dimensions in South African fiction. We academicians and researchers are well aware and very familiar with many literatures. And so when taking literature as a part of our life, we know that literature reflects life. It adds to reality, but it does not describe. It enriches the necessary competencies that our daily life requires and provides. And in this aspect, we believe that it has irrigated the necessary competencies or the life, our life, which has become a desert, has been irrigated by the literature that we love to learn and live. It is in literature the concrete outlook of humanity finds its expression. The literatures written in Africa, Asia, and West Indies exhibit authentic responses to the human condition aggravated by the social, cultural, and collective consciousness of the individuals. These new literatures represent a hale blend of authority and experience in complex human situation, and also the economic, political, cultural changes occupies the major form of this literature. And the central assertion of this literature is the logical transition or the cultural transition, continuity or the affiliation or identity is the talk of the literature or forms the major part of literary pieces. So my talk will be about African literature and then about South African literature, South African fiction, and then going to the main part of political, social, and cultural milieu. So when to talk about this African literature, modern African literature emerged out of the colonial encounter between Africa and Europe. Literature of Africa is a part of gift to the world. Chinua Achebe, the most celebrated Nigerian writer, defines African literature as the sum total of national and ethnic literatures of Africa. Gill presents Godimer's observation about African literature as a writing done in any language by African themselves and by others of whatever skin color who share the African experiences and who have what she terms as Africa-centered consciousness. So like the other literatures of the other nations, African literature enjoys what we can say an enviable antiquity, though its new medium is English. African literature is a serious intellectual and cultural activity with beautiful expression of the tumultuous changes happening all over the world or in Africa. It has been used as an instrument of instilling awareness, fostering national consciousness, thereby reminding the Africans of the inhumanities and the atrocities imposed on them by the colonial people, the forces of the colonial. And we know that this Africans are misguided by the individuals or the others to make them modern, and thereby these people have suffered a lot in the hands of the people or the colonials, and their literature has been inspired by the reappraisal of the place. African literature written after 1945 is part of oral tradition. We see that that's what it's a part of oral tradition. And George Joseph, in Contemporary of Africa, he writes about the oral tradition of the literature both in English and in Africa. He refers to English literature or the English Europeans as something referring to the diaries and the letters, while the African literature refers to oral literature or orature in verse or in prose. So when we talk about this oral literature, the prose is historical or mythological, where these people, these African people, use call and response technique to narrate the stories. So in that is what we say that stories, oral stories, there are so many traditional oral stories that has not been recorded by writing, but it has been recorded by the writers who came to know it through the other call and response. And so there, they use, it's a traditional form of folklore story, they use the tale of the trickster characters. In the folklore, they use trickster characters. For example, they say small animals uses its wits to encounter the larger creatures. So for example, there is called an Anansi, a spider, small spider, in the popular folklore of Ashanti people of Ghana. And Ijapa, the tortoise, it's a popular Yoruba folklore, and also Sankura, a hare below, that is the traditional folklore of East and Central Africa. And also we know that Africa in this gained liberation, most of the African nations gained liberation in 1950s and 1960s. And so at that time, people thought that what will be the major themes, or the what were the major themes used by the writers in the African literature. And so we know that this Africa has been representing the colonial encounter and the effect of colonial encounter in the writings. So African literature completely exhibited themes of liberation and independence. And we know that this Africa was influenced by the colonialism. There were Western languages, English, French, and Portuguese started flooding into Africa, and people started using that language to write. And also the major themes of African literature, if you take it, Africa's past and present, tradition and modernity, indigenous and foreign, individualism and community, socialism and capitalism, development and self-reliance, Africanity and humanity, the rights and roles of women, historical confrontation during Africans' colonial era, all that have become the part or the themes of African literature. And in this time, in 1930, a group of 3 writers, they started a movement, that is Aimé Césaire and Leopold Shankar and Leon Damas. They started a movement called Negritude. That was completely a movement started to show the protest towards French Revolution. And it is this moment that paved the way for the writers to express their feelings in African or their own European literary form. Thus, the literary endeavor of Africa is the crisis and the pain and the agony of the Africans who became scapegoats in the hands of the colonials. Coming towards to African fiction, we say that the first among the African fiction to gain attention was the powerful slave narratives from the West. So to talk about the slave narratives, the first slave narrative was the interesting narratives of life and adventures of Olaudah Equiano that was written in 1789, which vividly focuses the horrors of slave and slave trade. But soon after, the Africans started writing in the Western languages, English, French, and Portuguese. After that only, Joseph Ephraim Heisley, the first African, he wrote the first African novel in English, Ethiopia Unbound, Studies in Race Emancipation, that was written in 1911. And so keeping the immense richness of the oral tradition and also oral culture of the backdrop of the writings, the African writers expressed their views through fiction, whose predominant concern was the people and the African scenario which were under the colonial conquer, the colonial domination. So next we see that this African literature or African fiction becomes a new world of literary activity where the contemporary scenario or the reality of the African nation was portrayed. And then we come to writers who were very prominent. West African writers such as Oli Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, Osman Sebene, Kofi Abeno, Camara Leigh, and East African writers and Ngugi Thiong'o, Oket Betek, Thomas Mafelo, Eskia Mafele, and also Dennis Brutus. They wrote about the horrendous rule of the colonial people and also the sufferings and also the predicaments of the Black people there. All these writers, they wrote that what is happening in the streets, actually what is happening in the streets, what's happening in Africa. Their authentic portrayals of the real life situation paved the way to the outpour of the protest writings, that is the writings of the people to showcase to the society what way the Black people were living through. And they recorded the apartheid. Yes?
Can I interrupt? Your PPT is not visible on the screen now. So, you are visible, but the PPT is not visible.
Yes, now.
Can you do it?
Yeah, sure. I'll do it.
Ma'am, this happens when somebody tries to present their screen. So I request all the participants to not present their screens. When participants present their screen, the presentation kind of goes off the spotlight. So please don't do it.
For some, it's visible. It seems that you must pin the presentation to your screen. Each participant should pin the presentation to your screen.
Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. And so these writers have recorded the apartheid, pre-apartheid, apartheid, and the post-apartheid scenario in their writing. So we are now coming to South African literature. South African literature is a wing of African literature written in South Africa or by South Africans living in other countries. And being not a single entity, South Africa has been diverse ethnic groups and language, people speaking different languages. It's a distinctive literature in many African languages as well as Afrikaans. And also, the South African social, political, and economic history contributed greatly to the emergence of the literature of South Africa. And it was showcasing rare gems of literature. So we were able to get a lot of the rare gems of literature, rare writings by different writers of South Africa. As a serious intellectual and cultural entity or the literature that emerged from the hardships of the people and also recorded by the writers, the rulers or the colonial recorded by the writers, but the colonial white people, they have completely eroded, or they have completely oppressed the black people, that the victimized people and also the victimized writer started to express or record the predicaments and the sufferings and the reality of these people in their writings. So it has been acclaimed around the world for its innovative and radical approaches to the art of storytelling and the reworking of the language also. And also we know that South Africa, as it has a diverse ethnic groups, 11 they were officially accepted, or 11 languages were there, official 11 languages, and the annual publishing output favors English. That is, English comes first and African second, with 9 indigenous languages trailing behind with various shades of relevance. So South African English writings, they wrote about colonial writings and also liberal radical writings by whites, but when comparing to the writings of the black people, their texts were only, that is, their text range from the complexity of human situation or some ideologies like non-racialism, pan-Africanism, and about all the liberation or movements and their difficulties they experience in their life. To say about the South African literature, it is nothing but the conflict between the white conquerors and the conquered blacks, between the white masters and the black servants, between the village and the city. So this is what the South African literature thinks that, or it objectifies that. We see, let us go to see black literature, because it is one of the prime important literature that marks South African literature in the world level. So black writing has always been under the fence, and during the 250 years of slavery, it was a legal crime for the blacks to read and write. The experience of oppression provoked them to write. So they stressed the need to report and to define the conditions of the days. And the writers felt that it is the intrinsic duty of the writers to communicate the wishes of the people to the society and to present the reality of the South African scenario. And so the writers we can see that the black literature continues as one which is always under suppression or always under the pressure, and they are protesting against it, and they write their experiences there. So they were writing in English, Portuguese, and Dutch. Later on, for a broader reach, they start writing in English. And to talk about the black writings started flooding into the South African literature because these people, first it was written by the immigrants who felt alienated and also isolated in the land, but they were also taken up by the mesmerized beauty of that, or they were mesmerized by the beauty of the South Africa. So to talk about black writing, I must say that Mehudi was the first novel written by Sol Plaatje, because he was the founding father of the black literature. So what did he write in that novel was the trial of the Tswana people, that is encountering the Zulus under Shaka, and also the white people, that is encountering, or that's confronting and the white people's challenges, and also moving towards the interior. The writing Mehudi completely showcases the difficulties of the people, of course black people, in the landscape. And later, Thomas Muffalo wrote about Chaka, and this is the first novel written in English and translated in many other languages also. So when we talk about this, after this Chaka, South African government, that they implemented state of emergency, and many writers were sent to exile, many books were banished, and also the passport of Alan Paton, the writer, was confiscated for 10 years. And in this situation, people started writing protest literature. Alexla Gumas, A Walk in the Night, it completely talks about the difficult situation of the South Africans in this black black country. That is, they say themselves as black, their country as black, and under the colonial rule. And so these three writers, not only these three writings, I have just focused on these three writings. The whole black writings, many of the writings which we are going to see in the later part of my talk, talks about or speaks about the reality of the situation or the reality of the real life people started or the people were encountering in South Africa. So next is what we see, the drum magazine or the African drum, because we saw in the first there is a negritude movement which started to give the South African literature a special value. And this drum magazine, the African Drum, this was started by in 1950. The writers thought that their voice should be heard to the people, or their voice could be echoed to the people. So they wanted something else, the medium, to express their wishes. And so it was launched by Robert Crisp, journalist, and at that time the editors were Joe Rathby, Don Spotwala, Zuma Anderson, and the writers who constantly contributed to the writing of writing to Drum magazine, it's otherwise called African Magazine, was Peter Abrahams, Alex Laguma, S.K. Mafalele, and Richard Wright, and goes on with Themba, Nkosi, and Nyakasa. So this is what this Drum magazine was, one source or one vehicle for this African people or the victimized writers to voice out to the world that we are in a situation where we are no man in our own country. And the same thing is afterwards, when you see this, I think that it's in the mid of 1960, these four writers, a new rush of literary blood, that is Jan Raby, Etienne Leroux, and Brighton Breitenbach, and Andrew Brink, they started Dicestegers, that is the 60s, like that. Dicestegers, this movement, these four started. First, they started in writing in English, and later they started to write in, first they started to write in Afrikaans, and then later they started to write in English. These people completely used the medium to expose or to exhibit to the people the real atrocities imposed on the people by the white. And what's a speciality about this is, because they started writing in Afrikaans and later only it was translated into English. So many of the works are still now or till now is not being completely translated. But many of their works have been translated into 30 languages. I hope it is translated into 30 languages. So next we will go to this. So here comes the colonial writing or how this writing started after the colonization of the Englishmen. So we see that the confrontation between two civilizations and cultures made the South African writers contribute to the literature. So numerous writings that extolling the great tradition of South Africa appeared in the literary scene. And the fact that the backdrop of the novel is South Africa and the events incorporated with the story is South African traditional values, and the episodes and the political situation is not only an isolated or it is not a stereotypical writing of the people, because that is the need of the hour for the people, and they wanted that to write, or maybe I can say that it's the conscious effort of the South African writers, those who wishes for the emancipation of the literary writings and also to eradicate or to erase out the prejudices of the Western stereotype writings or the Western writers who have distorted the beauty of the South African literature. So here we see that these people always pictures, we will go to the English, glorifies the Englishman how. Whenever these South African writings that emerged in the literary scenario, there were two options. Because this, I can say that S.K. Mafalele, he was the person, or he was the writer, one who very consciously scrutinized the English writing, and through his novel, The African Image, he has completely taken up, or he has referred to the English writers Charles Scully and Sarah Gertrude Millin, whose writings that is teamed with racial prejudice, because at that time he welcomed the writings of Nadine Gordimer, William Plomer, Vandy Post, because they all dealt with the people of, that is, we can say that oppressed Negro people. So here SK says that all the English novels, they glorifies the Englishman and pictures the aboriginals as either dangerous savages or faithful servants. And all this has been, the same picture has been given in King Solomon's Mines and Alan Quatermain, and there animals are humanized and blacks are brutalized. So when we see about, or when we come to see the beginning of South African literature, we can say that one of the towering figures of the South African literature was Olive Schreiner. She is a feminist and a daughter of a Calvinist missionary, a progressive-minded writer who was born and brought up in South Africa. So she wrote the first text, The Story of an African Farm. This was the founding text of South African literature. She wrote in that text about a group of white people, white settlers, adults, children, even animals, and how the group of peoples or the group of characters live, and the horrendous life of the slaves as well as the people, those who are working in under the white people. The other novels, Trooper Peter Halkett of Mashonaland, Muti, Women and Labor, they also expose the brutal activities of the British South African Company. From that time onwards, a damn burst of pure literature, or we can say protest literature, started to flood the fertile plain of South African policy. So we see among them, we have some writers, stalwarts of South African writers, who have carved a special place for them, or Bessie Emery Head, Nadine Gordimer, Alan Paton, Coetzee, and Andrew Breen. We talk about Bessie Emery Head. She's a leading South African woman writer who wrote the traumatic experiences, disposition, alienation, dislocation, and also the beauty of the nature and the human heart in that. Her novels were Rain's Cloud, Maro, Question of Power, and African Saga suit well with the contemporary political, social, and cultural scenario of South Africa. To talk about Alan Paton, he in the first novel, Cry the Beloved Country, he speaks about the people caught into the racial conflicts of South Africa. His novels, The Land, is a novel, we can say that it's Go Debbie, and the novels The Land and To Faller Off, all these novels completely say about the racial conflict and also the people, those who are affected by this racial conflicts, and also by the what we can say, it is the life they encounter under the white colonials. And so when we talk about all these writers, Nadine Gordimer is, I can say that she's one of the towering figures of South African literature. And like her fellow Nobel laureates, Gunda Cross and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, she is also one of the writers who wanted to, or who has the inner thought to realign the situation or the history of South Africa through her writings. And then we, because her writings focus on or center around, we can say that bloody massacres, the culprits, she tells us the whites, and also the black people who were always trying to come out of the situation, but never they could. Her writings, Lying Days, Occasion for Loving, and also Burgess' Daughter, July's People, Get Alive, Pick Up. It goes on like that. All these novels tell you or tell us not only one situation, one episode, one predicament, but it talks of varied or myriad dimensions of South African literature. And to talk about Coetzee. Coetzee is the most applauded writer and the fourth South African writer to win the Nobel Prize. He dealt subtly the situations, the power, the degradation of the blacks in his novels. His Life and Times of Michael K, Age of Iron, and also Foe and Dust Lands, Waiting for Barbarians, and all these tell the real, or he presents the real South Africa to the world stage. And to talk about Chinua Achebe or S.K. Mafele, all these people, they are very much taken up, or they are very much empathetic towards the black people, and they are also a part of that. They wanted to convey the real situation of South Africa. And Chinua Achebe, we know that No Longer at Ease and Hills of Savannah, Things Fall Apart, each one depicts the culture as well as political and the social situation of South Africa, or the milieu of South Africa, and how it has affected the people, and how the people are now battling for their space and survival in their own country. And then to talk about Henry Philip Brink, he thought that he wrote in Afrikaans and later he started writing in English. His book, Kennis van Die, and that is in Afrikaans, Knowledge of the Night, was the first book to be banned by the African government. And not only Brink's book, but also Alan Patton's book, and Nadine Gordimer's Baja's Daughter, World of Strangers, Late Bourgeois World, all these books were banned by the South African government because the books support the blacks, and they were at least in a way a written document against the revolt of against the British people. And so next I thought that we will go to the main part of our talk, the political milieu, social milieu, and the cultural milieu. The words, I have just taken these words because it suits well with our political situation of South Africa. I have cherished the ideal of democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony with opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and achieve. But if needs be, it's an ideal for which I am prepared to die. We know all of us know Nelson Mandela, the iconic hero of South Africa, was sacrificed his 27 years of his life for the liberation of the black in the Robben Island prison. So we are so much taken up by Nelson Mandela, not only the South Africans, all of us, we Indians or Australians or anyone, we also revere Nelson Mandela as an iconic hero. And when we talk about the politics and fiction of South Africa, we know that South African literature, which is closely related to the political, cultural, and social factors, is directly or indirectly influenced by the political developments of the country. The South African writers, who were very much peculiarly attached to the apartheid and the consequent cultural, colonial, and political situations and the psychological situations, gave pure protest literature and the portrayals of the hostility between the whites and the blacks. We know that Robert Boyer, in his novel, in his writing Atrocity and Amnesia, he opines personal relations seem meaningful when they are touched or threatened by the turmoil associated with political realm. And Gordimer believes that a writer is part of the creative consciousness of the society, and he is shaped by the society, and reflecting all the situations or all the incidents that happen in a society. So in one of her interviews, she said that a writer is selected by his subject being the consciousness of his own era. I think that this is what all the writers do, and they become the consciousness of the era. And we know that it is very impossible to think, or it's virtually impossible to think South African literature without politics. Derek Attridge, he says that, or he says Coetzee's fiction as the private serves as a corrective to the public. And also he says that, George Orwell says that, a society faces crisis when the history is forgotten or neglected. Lombardi, he sees history as an integral part of writing, where politics is the main that is what we can say. Politics is the main feature of all the writings. And also S.K. Mafele and says that I revere the writers, the white writers as well as the black writers who dwell sympathetically on the fate of the oppressed hero. So when we come to the main part of the history or the politics of South Africa, I can very well say that most of the novels in South Africa are written by South Africans or any other authors about South African situation. The political movements forms the backdrop of the novels. One or the other novels, most of the novels I can tell. So the political movements of the late 1970s, that means the liberation movement, the Sharpeville massacre, Soweto uprising, Black conscious movement, the strikes of 1918, war was, all these forms the backdrop of the novels. All these were the talk of the novel. This occupies the central stage of the novels. So when we talk about this, I'm just listed here, and I'm going to talk about first about the Sharpeville massacre. That was completely, I can tell you sure that the Sharpeville massacre was the backdrop, or that was a part of the novel of most of South African literature. And if you go with this, the blacks in South Africa were regulated by passes and were required to carry this pass, an official document, and they should produce it on demand by the white authority, and they force pain of imprisonment if the black people fail or refuse to show. You can see in the picture in the top, the people, a black person holding a pass. It seems as if similar to our passports, and these people, they have to hold this pass, and issuing the passless were met with resistance during the 20th century. The issuing of passes became one of the cornerstones in the colonial racial South African country. And see, the African people, they became, passes made them temporary sojourners where they were born. These people refused to carry the passes. So what happened was, the government also issued an order that this has to be made compulsory, and people, or the blacks, the Indians and the coloreds, cannot live in South Africa without the passes. So what happened was, people started protesting for them. And the first initiative, or the first protest against passes, was initiated by Mahatma Gandhi in 1906. And the second in 1913, first African men and women started to revolt against, or to demonstration campaigns were started in Free State, that is Orange Free State, which is completely segregated for the black people. And in 1930s, I think that 1930s and after that, people started protesting against passes in Orange Free State as well as in Sharpeville, all the places. You can see in the picture that women were holding the placards that they don't want, and also pass burning campaigns were held by the people of South Africa, or that Orange Free State, and also by the various trade unions. The past and the resistance. You can see in the picture Sharpeville massacre I have given. The past and the resistance against this, or that moved forward, or that paved way for more liberation. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You can continue.
Yes. So the pass and the resistance campaign, the pass and the resistance against this has been carried out, or this helped the South Africans to mount against more and more liberations, and also liberation movements, and also massacres. So the African National Congress, planned to conduct a rally against the passes on 21st March 1960. So these people, the thousands of people, they started marching towards Sharpeville town, and they have planned only a very peaceful rally. At that time, the South African police failed to give the crowd an order that they are going to fire. And so the people were not given any prior instruction. The police started firing against the people, and people started running for life, and some people were shot at the back, and hundreds of people were shot at the back, and some people, to safeguard themselves, they started pelting stones at the police. So as a result, excessive force was used, and so many people were killed. And at the beginning, 69 were killed and some 800s of them were wounded. In this condition, we know that many participants who took part or attended this Sharpeville massacre, this campaign was not members of any political party. They were students, they were women and children. They attended this campaign because they opposed this pass laws also. When great many people in the town, Sharpeville town, they refused to carry passes, this government declared an emergency, telling that these people can be retained or that can be arrested without any question and held for 6 months. So many people died in the prison and also under the white policemen of torture and trials, and also they were of starvation, and completely many people were sent to life imprisonment like our Nelson Mandela also. So thousands of the individuals, they thought that it is their need somehow to fight against the Sharpeville massacre. So they continued their fighting. So this resistance campaign lasted for 156 days, left 69 dead and 184 wounded. So in that time, when Godimer was asked about the aesthetics of the history, she told that, you see, a historian can tell you the events that come about through the power shifts, but the novelist is concerned with the history of the individuals who make up the history. It's right, this history, this is even now we read it in the novels. And we are aware of that only because these writings have been documented by the African writers. So this we know very well that the carrying passes inside their country, and with that identification only they can live in their country, means that is something, it's beyond imagination. And so the pass laws created a great hazard for the people, and that were documented and recorded. And that's what the first, I would say that the conservationist of Nadine Godimer, it says that the Jacobus, the herdsman and Marine, he says that there are people working in the farm without papers. If they are caught by the police, he says, I'll say to them, I don't know you, and maybe these boys were someone hiding in our farm with the other boys who are working with the pass. You know, there are people, those who have no passes. There is Big Boy who traveled 17 years ago from Rhodesia, still working in South African farm during this time when the other records there without papers. And we know that July's people, July, a servant, he told that I was working in a hotel and without papers. All of us working in the hotel kitchen have no papers. And in pickup, we say that Abdu, that is a garage boy. He's not a mechanic. He doesn't have a paper. But why do these people allow this blacks without papers to work in their farm and garages? Because to ensure cheap labor. And On Rage is the novel written by Wilbur Smith, a British novelist. But he's so confrontational, writing about this South African situation. And here he speaks about the conflicts people undergo during these massacres and during these restrictions. And also the life and times of Michael K. of Hoodsey in the Fox season of End, and that is Alexla Guma's novel that speaks about the conflicting situations which South Africa imposed on the people of their own country, and how they go through or how they endure all these difficulties. And Loretta Nekbo, she is called as the Sharpeville generation. She writes the novel and novel of Sharpeville, and her protagonists are the characters who were completely tried and by the police in one or the other way, impel them to enter into the Sharpeville massacre or the demonstration. And also she writes about the after effect of that. And also this A Night of Their Own is completely unleashing the difficulty, the dark corridors which the blacks were treading through. So I know that all the writers, they were trying to make us aware of what was the situation where the blacks have been living through. And next, if you go to 3, we can see the Soweto uprising, June 16, 1976. That's the another important political incident which took place in South Africa that becomes the backdrop or the top of the novels. So in the new South African government in 1953, they implemented a Bantu Education Act. That is a black education. There is, for example, I can say that they have establishing separate black education department and asking them to prepare a curriculum for the black people. And here, Alistair Body refers to Dr. Henry, the Minister of Affairs, is telling natives, blacks should always be aware that they should not aspire for higher positions or equal to the white people. The blacks were not to be allowed to receive the kind of education which the whites are enjoying or they are experiencing. And instead, they should receive an education designed to provide them with the training to prepare the black people to work as laborers in the white settlement. Or he's saying that the blacks should know that they are inferior and they are given this sort of education only to prepare them hewers of wood and drawers of water in the white houses. So this thought made the black feel that they are secondary and they are being refused all the rights in this country. So people start that the main aim of this Bantu Education Act was to replace English with Afrikaans. And so we all know that Britishers, when they were in our country, they use our Indians only to take in the positions of the clerks and the very mean jobs. They never allowed us to go for the higher post in the government. So the same thing, the South African students movement and the Black conscious movement, all these, they started that they have to make something else, or they have to fight against this, otherwise their life would be meaningful. And so this is what that I wanted to tell you is this Bantu education, how it got its name Soweto uprising. Soweto is the name given to the townships where the people, the black people live. It is the southwestern townships of Johannesburg. And in one morning, June 16, 1976, thousands of students started marching towards Sharpeville, that is the Orlando Saucer Stadium of Anne, to protest them regarding the, sorry, Somi, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Somi?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So they started marching towards Johannesburg in order to show their protest against this. And the black residents of Soweto and also the people, the students, the teachers, all of them just marched towards that stadium. So when they were marching very peacefully towards that Orlando Saucer Stadium, 50 policemen stopped the people and they asked them to turn and go away. So at this juncture, people they were not prepared to go away from whatever they have planned. And so the the European colonials, they were angry and they started tear gas. They started using tear gas and also live bullets to the people. And the people did not know what to do at that time. Hundreds of teachers accepted the people's protest against this. You see, I met one of the lady from some European country. She told me that I met her once there. She told that I took part in Soweto uprising as a student when I was 14 years old. She, she's still living. She's a white. But she told that I took part in it because I felt that it's not necessary to replace English with Afrikaans. It's inhuman. And I was taken to jail. So all these people, the Soviet uprising, the people thought that, no, it's all about suffering. It's about suffering. The black people are suffering. It's about suffering. How to end suffering? That's why to end the suffering, they wanted to take this to the notice of the white people that we are not prepared to go with the language of English or the Africans, because they thought that this Africans was the language of the oppressor. They all had placards in their hand, down with Africans, hell with Bantu education. Some people started singing songs which made the people, that is to urge with the power, urge with the spirit of this fighting, this fight, this protest, this rebellion. And so Soweto becomes a symbol, in the symbol of inhumanity, atrocity, and also we can say that lifeless. Just these people, they felt that we are living but we don't have any life, because this country is not ours, this place is not ours, education is not ours. So in this situation only, they say that the Black Conscious Movement, the head of the Black Conscious Movement, Sifo, says that when all these firing was going on, when they asked the policemen, they say that we could not distinguish between the mourners and the mob, because so many people died, and these black people, they went to attend the funeral and of the washing of the hands, a custom of their own. And this policeman said that I can't differentiate between the mourners and the mobs. So again and again, they shot the black people. Many of them died. And when they were asked to collect the dead bodies, the white policeman told the black policeman to collect the brains of the black people with a shawl. So you can see that how difficult or how pathetic the situation of the blacks lived there. And this Soweto uprising also marks the inhumanities done to the black by the whites. And so now we can see that I was telling about in the beginning of this we saw about Nelson Mandela's words, which he was telling that I'm prepared to die for that. And this ideology only was based in the novel Burgess' Daughter by Nadine Gordimer, and she has made the hero Lionel, who was a white man who spent his time or spent his life in the prison for the liberation of South Africa, which was his home, and for the liberation of the South African people, which was his human family. He died for the sake of what he was in prison also. And there were, I have seen here, you will see here Soweto novels. There were 4 Soweto novels that speaks completely about Soweto, completely about the inhumanity of Soweto, completely about the existence of the blacks. They are Serots to Every Birth is Blood, and Setla is Right on the Whirlwind, Miriam Talley's Amantala, and Zamain's Children of Soweto completely depict the Soweto uprising of 1976 and its aftermath. Memory is the Weapon of Don Metera. It speaks about the service of anti-apartheid activism in South Africa and how the blacks are living in the midst of all these things. So we can see next is, these are the pictures which you can see how the Soweto uprising people started running and people are marching towards, and how the placards they have with hell with Africans and other things. And to talk about Black Conscious Movement, this is a grassroots anti-apartheid movement emerged in the mid-1960s. That is, this was completely, this started by creating a vacuum, because so many people were jailed and put in imprisoned, and also they were trialed and killed, and all these difficulties they encountered, and these people wanted to focus it to the people. So the Black Conscious Movement is completely a movement started, or a social movement for the political consciousness. It records the strikes, all the strikes, Boer Wars, there is Anglo-Boer War 1, Anglo-Boer War 2, and also about all these wars, all these strikes, all these movements, they only concentrate on one thing: emancipation of the blacks. You can see that down the Country My Skull, it's Croc's Country My Skull, and Nkozi's, that is, we can say underground people, and also we can say Maffei's Welcome to Hellborough, Age of Iron of Coetzee, and Midlands and Emergency. All these novels speak about the political and social tragedy unfolding the life of the people. 1 minute, 1 minute. I can just. Sorry, I forgot to put my charger there and I forgot to switch on. Very sorry for the inconvenience. And also, the country ravaged by racism and violence. And also, all these writers, all these novels, they were concentrating on the unflinching effort to emancipate the blacks, for the freedom and to get them free from the clutches of the colonial rule. And this is so we come to this end of this political milieu. We say that the political commitment of the writers exhibiting this colonial dilemmas and the historical consciousness significant in the novels, along with the changing scenario of the South African history, is painted naturally sans artificiality. In a setting of the freedom struggle and also of South Africa as the backdrop of the novel, the authors dexterously merges history, politics, and fiction. So how we will say that how this social milieu in the novel has been represented by the writers. Martin Luther King, who always concentrated or who always fought for the liberation of the black, is the iconic figure which I have taken there as the header of this social milieu. That is in South Africa. Here, Black Lives Matter. So it's not distant. What is that? Martin Luther King says that your dawn is not distant. You wait patiently, fight for it. You can see your you can see your emancipation, your freedom, not in the very distant. And so we can say that writers are committed to the society in which they live. And an astonishing feature of the writer is that he or she passes on the issues which affect the society and the reality through the works. Williams in Culture and Society deserves that a committed writer deals with the real life situation because he or she is engaged in writing a specific period of a particular society. The primary obligation of these writers or to find out the social and the ethical issues in the society, and they have to find out the solution for that errors or the issues in the society. And also they say that the main obligation of these writers is to portray the genuine image of the society to the writers. And the committed writers, they always feel that, or they present the society from which they hail. That's what Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, and Nadine Gordimer, they completely presented the society from which they came, the horrors of the society, and how these horrors should be turned into happiness, or we can say that emancipation. And so we have Sarah Gertrude Millin and Sol Plaatje and also Miriam Talley, Nadine Gordimer. They found fruitful experiences in the injustice of the minority rule. And so as a result, fiction came dominant quickly because they were able to write much about the blacks and also about the whites. And Nadine Gordimer, when she was expressing her thought, she says that I have no religion. I have no political dogma. The only thing which always was pestering my mind, haunting my mind was the color bar is wrong and utterly indefensible. That's what the moral code I found in me, and I was able to write for the black people. We know that to deny people their human rights is to challenge their humanity. And also, South Africa is a multi-dimensional, beautiful, exotic, mysterious country. But unfortunately, there are a lot of injustices and evils happening there in the society. That is like, we can say servitude, injustice, caste, class system, and also poverty that has completely made or demarcated the South African nation. And racial prejudice is especially abhorrent in the society. And the apartheid government, they enacted new laws from between 1948 and 1990. We know that apartheid. I don't want to tell you about apartheid because it's enforced by the new South African government in 1948 and between 1990. And also these laws completely curbed the rights and the rights of the South Africans on the basis of the skin color. We know that racial discrimination, whites and the blacks. Blacks are the inferior and whites are superior. So on that, they have just implemented a lot of acts, apartheid new acts, where the important two acts, there are against Land Act is there, then Existence Act, PASS, and so many are there, and I am concentrating on two acts there: the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act and the Immortality Act. See, this Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act and the Immortality Act completely aims at curtailing the cross-racial relationship between the whites and the blacks. I'm not telling about only the relationship means the sexual relationship, not at all there. It's been the relationship between in any way, between the master and the servant, or between the sisters brother relationship, or anything. Universal brotherhood is not there in South Africa. And also we can see that this cross-racial relationship becomes the center part of the novels. And a sport of nature, the first happy relationship between black man Waila and the white woman Hilela occurs in Sport of Nature. That is completely a man and wife. That is partner relationship. I mean, Baj's Daughter, there are writer pictures the relationship of Rosa and Basie. She calls him Zwalinzima. That is not at all a relationship of any other kind. That is a brother-sister relationship, because Lionel allowed the blacks to live in his home. And also about Julius people, there is the relationship between the servant and the master, white master and the black servant. And Too Late, the Phalatrop, the Path of Thunder, that also speaks about white-black relationship. And at last, the Path of Thunder, Lane and Sari, they flee to the Mozambique to find, because there's the Mozambique is a place where they can freely marry a white woman. And Mating Birds, the black Cydia and also white Veronica, they found it very difficult to have a life in this what can I say, white dominion, that is South African country. And so this cross-racial relationship was completely condemned, and also Africans were completely tested and tried by the white government if they find any white or the black relationship going on like this. And next is, we see the dilemma of the blacks. We can see that the new legislation, the new orders that has completely curtailed the rights of the blacks and the white. They have imposed a lot of restrictions on the part of the blacks, and the blacks were denied of all the rights as a human being. We can say that he was no man in his land. He was always harried by the day and haunted by night by the thought that he is no one, he is secondary. And so this insecurity, this pain, this what we can say pressure, this longing or the craving for freedom made him feel that, or to live a life under the threat of always being spent. And so to talk about the denial of rights, Miriam Talley, Nadine Gordimer, everybody, every writer, I can say they are they witnessed the scenario. They witnessed the dilemma of the colonized Africans and others. So these people very realistically, very sympathetically portrayed the dilemma of the blacks where they were no man. And we can see that rights of education. We are talking about rights of education. There are separate schools for the blacks and separate colleges and university for the black. So I talk about Nadine Gordimer, and you may ask that why I'm always talking about Nadine Gordimer, because I was so much taken up by Nadine Gordimer, the white writer who has been fighting for the black people. She was a political activist. She went in exile, and her books were banned. And even Nelson Mandela, after the release from the prison, he wanted to see Nadine Gordimer first, because she, I used to say, white angel who sang the symphony for the black people. So she was, her mother and father were British descendants, Tsarist Russia, but they were settled in South Africa. Nadine Gordimer has seen the black suffering. So as a schoolgirl, she went to the convent of Lady of Mercy. She was telling, I went to the convent of the Lady of Mercy, but there was no mercy for the blacks. Again, I went to the dance classes, blacks were excluded. I went to the library, which is so precious for me, blacks were not allowed. This impinged my conscience, and I asked why. So this is the result, or this is why I started writing about for the white people. So here, when we talk about the education of the black people in the novels, here Nadine Gordimer, she tells about in Burgess' daughter, Rosa, the school where Rosa studied is a mixed school, but there were separate classes for the blacks and the whites. And the English-speaking white girl always expressed the blacks with some, some inferiority, that they speak bloody bows, thick Afrikaners, and dumb Dutchess. And so they never mingled with the black people. And also in the novels of Revelations of Alice Road, and also Sequers, The Quiet Violence of Dreams, these speak about a student, Tepeso, who has been admitted to the mental asylum in Cape Town only because of the atrocities and the imposed on the black students by the white people. And also another novel is Young Blood. It speaks of Sifo. He's called the Young Blood, who is a school-going generation. What are the difficulties? What are the atrocities he encountered in his school life? And then we will talk about labor. Labor is, we know that South Africa is a beautiful country built by the labor of the black people. The roads, the cities, the factories, everything is built by the black people. So we say that in the conservationist novel, they say that they were, that's it, hundreds and thousands of blacks were in the farms. More than 80% of the people were working in the pig iron industry. They are making use of the blacks. You can see that it's been pictured there. The blacks always hold the, there is the shawl and also the instruments during farming, that the nails became opaque and worn out, and it was wavering from one another, and they could not, even the blacks, they cannot touch it, they cannot feel it. And even Rosa tells that black men and women, children, living under insecurity, pressure, pain in the white farms. And she says that the dark satanic mills, they purchased the white labor for cheap souls. So we can understand that purchase the white labor for the cheap souls. That's why these people employ blacks in their farms. And also Lisa Frugart's Skinner Drift pictures the predicaments and the conflicts of the black farmers in the farms. And he was nobody in his own land. He was always intimidated by the fact that he is a mere black, and that the laborers felt they have no place to sleep even. They drop on the grass and sleep. Some people, over excessive work, they die even on the grass. I'm reminded of Elizabeth Barrett Branning's The Crying of the Children, where the children, after the excessive labor, they drop down on the meadows and sleep. So this is the condition of the black people in the farms and the fields and the mills also. So when the black characters appear in the novels, we know that they are only comic buffoons, savages, or servants, nothing else. Animals are humanized, but blacks are brutalized. That is what they say. So they live a life of oscillation, and anytime their life will be out of their control. And then we talk about living conditions of the people. I can go with the living conditions of the people. You see, all the authors, they say the black people live in the places where the whites will dump their waste. There's a picture there. White people dump their waste there. They make their homes with the tins and the boulders, which has been completely neglected or thrown away by the white people. You can see there in the novel July's People, Nadine Gordimer says that July's village is it's a habitation of mud houses. The cobwebs dangle there. Dirt is there. The fowls enter into the home. They eat there, and the fowls and the chicks squawks. And also there is the goats are tethered there. And in pickup, Julia is completely shocked to see the living condition of the living places of Abdul. Their goats are tethered there. Human beings also tethered there. It was the word there, and she could see a dead sheep there. The sheep lying near the house, flies around them. So the blacks have no better living conditions, and they were oppressed and suppressed in their mind very well. And also we can see that other conditions, if you see segregation. They are segregated in all walks of life. Even if you see the picture, the train, in the toilet, in the bar, in the laundry. Imperial laundry we wash only for the whites. Rex Theatre for the colored people, non-white shop. You can see a picture non-white shop, but there are shops where they may sometimes give. But Duma Dladla and Black University professor says that when I went to the shop, they give the kafir yesterday's stale bread. When the kafir goes for fruit, they give him half rotten, the black white stone wine. This is black, he says that. Thus the blacks are segregated in all walks of life. If you see next is European hospital, non-European hospital. Drinking fountain, white color, sitting, pavement, and walking. And you see in the beaches also, only whites. City of Durban under the section 37 of the Durban beach by laws, this bathing area is reserved only for the white people. And you can see more rather sympathetic one, or one which one will touch our heart was natives, Indians, and culprits. If you enter these premises at night, you will be listed as missing. Armed guards shoot and die and sight. So you can see that the black people cannot even live in their country, because if at all they went to a place where it is restricted for whites, they will be shot to death. And also, Fallon in the book Black Skin and White Mask, he speaks about the very pitiable condition of the black people. He says, I quote, "The Negro is bad, the Negro is ugly, and the Negro is mean. The small boy is afraid of the nigger. Nigger is a Negro boy." And so evidently declares the segregation of the black people they undergo in their own land. And also Karega's Petals of Blood, that speaks about the conflicting situation of the black people in their own land. And Life in South Africa was a seminal text which tells the real life the blacks go through in South Africa. And also Buckingham Palace and District 6, they talk about the life of the colored king. And Emergency and Emergency Continued speaks about the emergency which the blacks endure in their life. And next is, we'll go to the culture. And the culture is, you can say, South Africa or African continent is always referred to as dark continent. But I can say it's a rainbow nation with its 50 million people known for its languages and religious beliefs. An ethnically diverse nation, South Africa is more than a cultural melting pot. It's a big, warm orgy of culture, full of different ingredients and amidst surprises, and developing its richness over rich flavor over century. If you send in the down the pictures of Zulu culture, Seto culture, all these culture pictures I have just given there, and it is a multi-racial country, demarcating distinct subgroups with the color and also skin of the color, white, black, and also it's of many ethnic groups, Zulu, Xhosa, Bepeso, Tswana, Tosanga, Venta, all these people, they speak Bantu languages and they live there. And so much of the culture, South Africa's cultural activity has been a family, the art of storytelling, and their lifestyle, their beliefs, everything constitute the culture of South Africa. And one of we can say the outstanding cultural elements, or the main thing we have to think is it's the continent of which follows multiculturalism. Many diverse ethnic groups live there, and hybrid mixtures of different cultures coexist and give meaning to the culture of South Africa. We know that when we talk about culture, there will be myth and rituals. Myth and rituals and symbols or the elements of culture which explains or which depicts or which portrays the beautiful, glorious culture of any country. So here the writers uses the contemporary myth to which illuminates the seamy side of the life and to highlight the public follies, troubles, and uncertainty of life and death. And the art of, because all this culture and the myth and everything has not been, the art of storytelling was only in the beginning and writing was not at all documented. And so these novels, all the novels, they encapsulate the South African culture, and they are an unshakable testimony to the cultural discourses of racially divided country. And we say that the reality of the South African society is pictured through the culture. The writers depict the culture in order to picture the real South African society. The cultural splendor, the cultural glory of South Africa is being recorded or documented by the writers in their works. So the first thing I wanted to take is myth. We all know that that is, myth means a story or something relating to the religion or some actions. It's not only something writing or a story, but it is an action, it is a deed. And here writers are deeply fascinated by the myth of Mandela, and all the writers see Mandela as an iconic figure who spent, or who, not I can't say it's who spent, who sacrificed his life for his own people. And no, it's not 1 or 2, 27 years of his life during the Rivonia trial, where with Nelson Mandela, so many others were also arrested and sent to life imprisonment. That is, we can say about Abraham Fisher and Walter Sisulu. All these people with Mandela was sent to life imprisonment. So Mandela's commitment and sacrifice can be paralleled with the heroes of the authors, of the writers of South African society and literature. Sorry, the novels Burgess' Daughter and July's People illuminate the Mandela myth and parallels their action to Mandela. Mandela is a savior, and his feat was godlike, and he did it, and sacrifice is needed for freedom is the word of Mandela, and so he did it. So here we see Lionel, who is just the replica of Mandela, who spent his time in the prison for the black people, for his breath was the liberation of black. So he lived and died. The African people in the novel, The Burgess' Daughter, speak about Lionel when he is our father. He is our father who saved us from the clutches of the white colonialism. And so then, now if you speak about July's People, July is the servant of the white master Maureen and Smile. Bam. So he has saved the family while there was in Johannesburg, the situations were turning on. The black revolutions going on and the houses of the whites were burned. So this July's People was written in 1981 by Nadine Gordimer, who was able to visualize that is before 13 years when apartheid was abolished. She was able to visualize that one day there will be a time when whites and blacks or the situations will turn against those white people. So here, the charity of Mandela towards the black people is paralleled with the story of Lionel and Julie. And actually, Maureen used to call Julie is our frog prince savior. And next I go to the creation of biblical myth. And creation stories are three creation stories in Bible. That is the creation of the world, Genesis 1 and 2, Garden of Eden, Genesis 3, and Noah's story, Genesis 6 and 9, are taken as myths in the story. Yes? The time?
It's almost time.
The Bible story in Conservationist and also in Get Alive, the author creates Cain and Abel story there, and Cain and Abel are brothers. Here Marine is seen as the Cain who has been expelled from the Garden of Eden. Likewise, Marine leaves the garden and he goes away. And also Paul's Garden of Eden serves him as something else, brings his vision to serve the earth and live a life. So this Bible story is completely taken by the authors who believe in Christianity, and also by the other authors. I take Noah's Ark Noah, we know that Bible, God told Noah to take his family and others in the ark so that to sustain flight. He withstood the 45 days flood. Just like here, Noah taking the family of the master towards his home in a white, yellow Baki, that is, Baki is an ark. Maureen and Bam says that he is the savior, one who saved us. And Noah, that is, July has been personified as the Noah of the Bible. This is all my perceptions, not the perception of the author. Author has given it. These are the perceptions of social and cultural myth and everything, milieu, that we see it. We see it when we read it. And the rituals are, we can say that Bruce Lincoln says, a coherent set of symbolic action that is real transformative effect on individuals. We follow a lot of rites. We follow, that is the rites from birth, funerals, and also we have funerary rites, birth rites, marriage, puberty. That's the right, the ways of living and conservation. It speaks about the rites of funeral and how that burial, decent burial, gives the transition from one world to the other world. And Islamic beliefs, though there are Zotos, Zulus and others, the writers speak about Muslims and also about Christians. In Quran, the pickup, the Quran is being completely followed there about the Ramadan fasting, about the 5 times missing call, and also about the wearing a scarf over the head. All the things has been followed by Julie, who is a Christian who picked Abdu from the garage as a life partner. And also, God-man link is always seen in religion. We always relate ourselves to God because when we find difficulties crop up in our life, not because that some God is there, but because we will have a support with God when fear goes, when we get fear in our heart. That is in the house then, Claudia and Claudia, when she hears the murder of Carl by Duncan, she completely submits herself to God. And queer culture is not an infringement in South Africa. Gay culture, lesbian culture, all those are there in South Africa. And others in Housegund says, you, David and Carl, you are all homosexuals. In Embrace, he talks about Lady Benita, who is a lady, divorced lady, and she has connection with a girl. And also Seasons of Crimson Blossom speaks about gay culture or gay relationship as well as homosexual. And we see in Burgess' Daughter, they were singing. They have a group of homosexuals singing that is belonging to 18 age group. They speak about it. And it and also we have that in the Housegund, he speaks that so many people, 5 or 6 or 7 people living in a house are homosexuals. And there is nothing wrong in South Africa, and they have completely accepted that. And we have to see the other threads of cultural carpet. In music, dance, food, clothes, or the we can say that cultural elements which adds beauty to the culture of South Africa. And we have to see music is very very important part of culture, and dance is also the important part of culture of South Africa. We see their jazz music and also thudding pop music and in South Africa. In all the novels, as time runs out, I am just going a little fast, and music came to South Africa because people do not know the art of writing that time. Everything they communicated through music. And the dancers, they celebrated Christmas, they celebrated Yam Festival. In Things Fall Apart, all those things, they celebrate Yam Festival, and also dancing and singing and having meat and drinking, everything was carried. That was a type of the living way of them. And also you see, I'll go against with dance is there and food is there. And once more I'll come and when I go. And this novel's Conservationist, Housegund, Get a Life, Dance with Poor Man's Daughter, Pick Up, all this this novel speak about the importance of music and dance, and also because that is a part of the life of the South African people. Here are some pictures I have taken, the traditional dances of South Africa, and the food that constitutes of beans, mealie, and also rice, fish, all this things whichever are relished by them, bread and slosh of brandy. And only 2-3 quotes I will say there. Set of tomato sauce, marmalade, honey, mustard, bread, mealie, a grass wine drinking, there is a grass wine and also usual beers, and also pork sausages, pork rolls, and slosh of brandy, and also they say that yogurt, honey, fruit. So all these things, these people, they were African people, were very crazy of food, and they have they give more importance to food also, and this food forms a great that elevate the culture of South Africa. And next is we have our clothes, that are the traditional clothes which they use in any occasion, and that is sort of in this occasion. And so I can tell about Pamela Toots' Dance with the Poor Man's Daughter. I have said that through the protagonist eyes, it gives out a complete vivid picture of South African culture. So the novels of South Africa completely unleashes the myths and rituals, telling us how South African culture was important and how glorious it has been. So now I just give you some recommended novels for you here. Peter Abraham's Mind Boy, We Cried the Children, and this PowerPoint will be shared with the organizers, and you can get it. So I'll just go through it. These are the novels I just give you for a reading so that you can explore more South African literature, South African culture, and these are till 2019. And these are the novels that has been released in 2020. And these 3 novels are we expected in 2000, that is October 20, August 20, and then February 2021. And so this is what stamp out racism, say no to racism. This is what the authors meant it, all the writers, because they want harmony in South Africa, where the whites and blacks live together there. And so to conclude, I can ask that when this apartheid was erased in 1994, and the new their government, the black government, taken up the charge, there was the most prominent question: what would the writers again write? So at that time only, this Coetzee was telling, why not? The effects of the apartheid will be lingering in our minds, and there are yet more to light about that. At that time only, the new South African dramatic era was characterized by literary critic Stefan. She says that describes as a honeymoon literature or celebration literature. So celebrating the freedom, celebrating the release from the clutches of the black people. You'll write. Then witness literature was the previous one, when they witnessed and wrote it. Now let it be honeymoon or celebrating literature there. So the South African novels or models of statutory books of perception, which any works or any era people can follow it. All the works for race, the different problems and predicaments faced by the blacks and the whites in the changing scenario. The predicaments of the blacks or the predicaments of any people who occupies the edges of the society. The authors who optimistically wanted to see the dawn of the people are done, or they have documented, written, they have represented the reality from their heart, and that has happened. And now what is South Africa is only because of the hardships, hard work, and the humanistic vision of the writers. And so through the novels, they have created awareness to all the people through the racial discrimination, cultural diversity, the encounter between the private and the public, thereby bridging the unbridgeable. The authors gave a hope of vision to the readers and the people, and that has happened. And now the people are now living in South Africa with free from the clutches, breathing a fresh life. And so I thought of ending up my this talk with the South African national anthem, but I think that when I clicked on it, it is impossible for me to give it. Please just go to the YouTube and hear the South African national anthem, which is so beautiful to hear, and that urges the audience, the spirit of all the people also. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Janata.
Yes.
It was such a. Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful presentation. It was such a comprehensive session on South African fiction. We could really feel the South African experience through your session. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now we may give some time to the participants to raise their questions.
Yes, of course. I'm so happy to hear it.
There is a question over here.
Yes.
How can we relate as well as differentiate between South African colonial literature and Indian colonial literature?
Yes, yes. Yes, because South African colonial literature, we have been recorded by the South African writers how the colonial experience was. We also have the colonial literatures in India, Indian literature of Amitabh Ghosh writings, colonialism and also nationalism has been completely recorded in the writings of Amitabh Ghosh. So we can have a comparative study of colonial literature of India and colonial literature of South Africa. We can see there are the similarities there. The only the thing is they are the blacks and we are the Indians. We were under the suppression of the Britishers and they were under the suppression of the Europeans. The experience we went through, the blacks or we, and moreover, we can take the Dalit studies also. Even in the Dalit studies, the Dalit writers, they write the dilemma of the Dalit people in our country, where the upper class people are just dominating the lower class people. So all this together as witness literature. In Indian colonial literature and South African colonial literature are very similar. The thing is only the people are of different origin.
Okay, ma'am. There is another question from Krishnendu. Does Kujit's Waiting for Barbarians present something different from other post-colonial novels in the description of both the colonizer and the colonized?
No, the title, if you see the title itself, Waiting for Barbarians, that is Coetzee very beautifully, but in a way subtly presents the difficulties of the people, not completely away. Coetzee is as a white writer. Coetzee as a white writer, he witnessed the difficulties of the black people. This is not different from it. Of course, almost all the writings, maybe in one way or the other way, they express the different strata or the stratified society in a different levels, but completely the core of the novel comes about the difficulties, the sufferings, the life of the black people, which is under the verge of being spilled. That's what I say that. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. A question from Rimpis on the wall. Is there any cross-cultural influence in African fiction? Is there any cross-cultural influence in African fiction?
Yeah, in African fiction, we know that Africa is a land which has, it's a diverse ethnic and language speaking people. And so there are this cross-cultural in the sense we can tell. I told you that South Africa and Africa is also, it's a multiculturalism is followed there. But if you take Africa, Zulu, and that is Venda, Toswana, Basotho, all these people, they follow different culture. That is entirely not different. But in one way or the other way, their beliefs, their myths and other things, and there maybe the for the beliefs that they follow during the puberty, birth, death, all those things may vary in a little way from one or the other. So cross-cultural cross-culture is there, or cross-culturalism is there in Africa because it constitutes or it comprises of different ethnic and language-speaking people.
Okay, ma'am. There is a request from Pinky Anthony.
Okay.
Could you please share some references to ecology with reference to their landscapes, deserts, animals in South African literature?
Yes. In a novel, we see we have been portrayed by the other writers, or we have been made believe that South Africa is a desert more. But South Africa is a beautiful continent. When I was going through this, I just turned the pages or I browsed in the net. You can see beautiful lands in South Africa, beautiful exotic scenery in South Africa. Even in the Pick Up a Novel, the protagonist Julie, she goes to Abdu's place and she sees there is desert and she believes that I can bring life here, and she tries to cultivate wheat there so that it will be a beginning for the people, so that the whole South Africa will be fertile. And actually we say that even writings flood into the fertile plain of South Africa, because South Africa has literary, or we can say that landscape beauty and even ecological study, away from new historicism or some social issues. this ecological study is a main part there. I did not concentrate on it because there are so many novels. If you speak about Bessie Emery Head's Maru, A Question of the Power, that speaks, she speaks how she portrays vividly the beautiful image of environment and also the beautiful image of human heart and how human and environment and they were inseparable and they lived together for the betterment of both. Hope I answered.
Yes, ma'am. There is a question from Ambika Pillai. Language being the soul of any writing, why didn't the popular South African writers mentioned by you make an attempt to write in Afrikaans, the language of common people?
Yes, because that's a very good question, Ambika ma'am. So I would say that all this South African literature emerged in South Africa, whereas the traditional language is Afrikaans. And many writers, the natives of South Africa, whether they are white or the black, their medium of instruction or they studied or whatever they know was the first they know African was the traditional language there. Later on, the Western languages started flooding into South Africa, Portuguese, French, and also English. That's why the authors, those who have attempted their writing, wrote first in Afrikaans, but later their books were translated into English. And I can say that most of the South African writers' languages were translated into almost nearly 18 to 20 languages. Most of them. Some of the writers, Nadine Gordimer's books were translated into 30 languages. So Afrikaans was the only language they know from the start. And when the new languages came, they started adapting it and writing in that.
Okay, ma'am. There is a question from Ashley David. Ma'am, could you refer to the propagation of dominant image of Africa in the Western imagination rather than portraying the context in the true form, as in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and the arguments of African writers against it?
Yeah, because many of this question is a very good one, because many of us, even me, when I started reading the African literature, I had a thought that how can this white writers write about the black people? And we were talking about the black civilization, black culture, and how people were reacting towards that. So we feel that always the whites only brutalize these people. And that's what the question, no? How come the white and the black? The Westerners portrayal? Sorry.
And Western portrayal and the portrayal in Heart of Darkness.
So the portrayal of the Heart of Darkness, we know that English writers started portraying the people and their predicaments in their perception. But when I see this white South African, Nadine Gordimer, she has been an insider and outsider. She was very well able to portray it. I can rather say that a rare writer, a white writer, in her novels, neither the white characters are blacklisted nor the black characters are whitewashed. This is the writing of a white character. So even in the Heart of Darkness, we see that Joseph Conrad has written the bleeding realities that has really happened in a country. And also Western portrayals in the beginning were against the black. But now the writers who could understand or go in heart or learn about the predicaments of the black people were able to write it in the right way. And also the Heart of Darkness also portrays the same, I think so.
Okay, ma'am. There is an interesting question. Whom do you think took right decision to make alive the nation called Africa? Achebe or Thiong'o? Whom do you really personally support? Achebe or Thiong'o, and why?
This is a tricky question, I think so, because Ngugi wa Thiong'o, you say, is West African writer, and East African writer, and Chinua Achebe was a West African writer. Both of them have contributed in their own way what is called Africa. They have contributed in their writings what is called Africa. The time is Chinua Achebe records the society and also how the misguided attempts of the government had made the black people suffer in their life. And Thiago was a person or the writer who was very strong in his writings, forcing that what we can say, the forcing the spirit of the black liberation against the white. So Chinua Achebe was in a little mild way when he was speaking, and Thiago was in a little bit high way. That is what we can say, tougher way he speaks to the colonial. And I can say that more than that, there are so many white writers who was responsible in the making of South Africa, because this Alan Paton, Andrew Brink, and Nadine Gordimer, these three were the white writers who went in exile, who went to the prison, books were banned, and these people had more part than these two writers in the making of South Africa, the beautiful nation.
Thank you, ma'am. Then a question again from Pinky. What about the extent of feminist writings in South African literature?
Feminist writings, I say that there is dark feminism is there, eco-feminism is also there. Feminist writings, I say that is Bessie Emery Head. She has given a little bit of feminism. Chimamanda Adichie, she has written Buchi Emechada. These three writers have written feministic, that is something for liberation of the women. But even in these novels, in the authors whom I said, Oli Soyinka, we can say that how women were not liberated. But we, the readers, see that how women should be liberated. You can say this Oli Soyinka's play, The Lion and the Jewel. And also we see that Emechada's and Adichie's writings, we see how female in Comply, in Purple Hibiscus, how they were crushed under the domination of male chauvinistic ideas. And all this, I think that there are so many novels, Adichie's, Emechada's, Bessie Head, and also Nadine Gordimer also, in the late bourgeois of the world, My Son's Stories, where all the women are completely suppressed, and how they try to come out of that situation.
Okay, ma'am. Is there a digital diasporic writing in South African literature? Digital diasporic literature. If you can answer that.
Digital diasporic writing is yet to come, but diasporic writing is in South Africa. The other writers, those who have, they have gone from here, many writers. Now Kutsi is not here, and their writings are there. Away from that, there are some names, some writers whose names were not even known or explored to the literary scenario. There are writers, what we can say is Nekopa Ekabi, and also Avanesho Masaki. These people they write still from Canada, and also
Hello, ma'am.
yes.
Okay. There is one last question.
Yes.
How far these African writers succeeded in exploring their identity in their works?
Yes. So to say about how they succeeded in writing, their main aim was to that is to find out the errors, issues of their own people in their country, and make it known to the world, thereby making it, knowing it, making it, or then focusing it towards the white people. And all the African writings were the model or the open documents or the life being recorded in the novels. So they were, each writer was searching for his own identity in the midst of those 50 million people in South Africa, and each one's identity is connected with the other individual. This is the writers have recorded the social, historical, political identity of any person that is also connected to us or parallel to us, the individual's consciousness. So any writer, he believes that I am a part of South Africa, I have identity, and that is what protest literature came. So I think that because of these writers, these African writings or the South African writings, they have served as the weapons for revolution. And these writings instilled patriotism, spirit, as well as that is the urge to fight against the colonials who have dominated, suppressed, and oppressed them. I think that these writings paved the way for the emancipation of Black people, and of course, rightly, they have achieved their identity, or they were able to know that who they are in this South Africa. Did I answer?
Yes, yes, ma'am. There is one more question. Europeans tried to dominate Southern Africans, but why did they write inspiring novels about Black people? They tried to dominate.
Once more, Soumi.
Europeans tried to dominate Africans, but they wrote inspiring novels about Black people. Why?
About my talk, they are asking?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes, because it's quite easy and quite explicitly known. Because my topic is South African literature, the flares of social, political, and cultural milieu. And I was concentrating on the social, cultural, political milieu, and whichever authors have contributed more to it. That doesn't mean that the Black writers did not contribute to the literature. So that's what I was telling about the Black writers, Solomon Pladji and this Bessie Emery Head, and what we can say, Chinua Achebe, and all these writers, many of the writers called Loretta Nekoba. And see, I did not categorize it as black and white. In the part of telling about African Black writing and Black literature, I have mentioned a little bit of the people. But when I'm going through the course of my talk in political, social, and cultural, I have been talking about all the writers, not only the white, many of the and most of the Black writers also I included. And if you just check the PowerPoint, you can understand. I have also referred to the Black writers who have played a very dominant role. That is Chinua Achebe. And also, I have been speaking about white people because, always something else touches us when we do something which is not befalling on us. The white writers should be appreciated and acknowledged because these white writers were writing for the sake of the Black people. And Black writers also, of course, I have mentioned. But that's something great in acknowledging the writings of white people who have really written or really voiced out and have been serving as the torch bearers of the dilemmas of the Black people. I think so. And I don't know whether you accept it or not. I think so.
Hello. Hello, Janata ma'am.
Yes, Soumi.
No, this is Dr. Danya Ravindran. Hi, Janata ma'am. I also wanted to say hi to you. It's been a long while.
Pardon?
I'm Dr. Danya Ravindran from Government Polytechnic College, Kalashiri. It's been a while. I just wanted to say hi to you. It was wonderful listening to you. It was a comprehensive overall view. I also was, listening to you. I was also thinking about, given the intersectional nature of gender, nationality, and politics, and especially with South Africa having a backdrop of pure sexuality, homosexuality being considered as rather un-African and a kind of a Western import. I was curious to know how would this pure sexuality represented, how would this be represented in the post-apartheid South African literary imagination? What is your comment on that, ma'am?
Yes. Thank you, Ramya. Happy to hear from you. And I would say that in South Africa, during the apartheid and the apartheid period, this queer culture was not an infringement. But we can see that in post-apartheid South Africa also, they follow queer culture. Nothing wrong in following queer culture there. And we are very familiar in our country too. Gay couples are married. Two gay couples are married. Lesbian, that means I won't say lesbian. That is homosexual people. They have married. And so when that has been made legal in our country also, definitely I can say in South Africa, if you refer to the post-apartheid novels, you can very well see, that is, I can tell about The Leaves or the Seasons of Crimsons, that novel, that's a post-apartheid novel. It speaks about the gay culture there. And because nowadays we also started thinking about this type of people before we think that why they are behaving like that. That is something a hormonal imbalance, or no, I won't say like that. That is the making of the people. It's a creation by God, maybe fault of the God. So we should at least we are not much happy to be seen with them. We should at least acknowledge them. Let them. They are also like us. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for the question. Ma'am, we have already run out of time, so I think we'll conclude this session. So may I invite Dr. Mini VS, Faculty of the Department of English, St. Xavier's College, to propose vote of thanks. Mini,
Good
ma'am.
afternoon, all. Now it is time to already late to conclude the session. A word of appreciation and gratitude to the resource person, Dr. Janata Kumari, for such an enlightening and informative session. On behalf of the entire Xaverian family, ma'am, I thank you for being resourceful and adept in the areas presented and discussed today. I also thank the principal of our college, Reverend Sister Dr. Gigi Joanama Xavier, head of the department, Dr. Lima Anthony, the brilliant coordinators of the webinar series, Dr. Saumi Mary and Ms. Ruby Francis, all my dear colleagues of the department, and most importantly, all the participants of the series for making this happen. Thanking you all once again, I conclude. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. A word of appreciation and thanks to Dr. Saumi and the team of the English department for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to deliver in the webinar series. And I'm very sorry that I have taken a little bit of time more, and you all will be hungry, and I apologize for this. Dear participants, hope you enjoyed my lecture, and I have shared my mail ID with that in the PowerPoint. And if you have any queries, any suggestions, anything, any doubts or any clarifications, you can just drop a mail to my inbox. Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mary, ma'am. And thank you, dear participants. Hope we'll meet again tomorrow at 11:30. Tomorrow's session
sure.
is
I will be there.
Thank you, ma'am, so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to all of you who organized such type of the program. I am Mr. Himanshu Kumar, teacher of Government School PS Gopal and founder of SDM Trust Devgarh. We are so happy to participate in such type of the